Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and, well, just about everything. And, of course, your evangelist of the imagination and the still undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am robcasting you, bringing you Robservations episode number 725, the show about something. I welcome all of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity, you imagination connoisseurs, you people that make up the single greatest community on YouTube. I know it, you know it, we don't have to hear it, we just understand. And I want to welcome you on this Saturday, and I'm going to talk about something admittedly, I don't know shit about. I mean, I know something. I want to talk about the He-Man franchise. And let me just give everyone a disclaimer. There are people that love He-Man. One of them is the Richard. You know him. You love him. His artwork, his He-Man artwork is fantastic, actually. It's terrific stuff. He loves He-Man. Now, my experience, my understanding of the He-Man franchise goes all the way back to 1982. First time I ever saw He-Man, first time I ever encountered He-Man, which, by the way, was in a KB toy store at Bellevue Square Mall. I don't know what's up with my hair today, to be honest. As I look at I'm like, what the fuck is going on with the hair? Anyway, all right, well, you know, at least I have hair at my advanced age. But, you're just going to have to bear with me. So I was going to see June 4th, 1982. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan at the John Dan Cinema. I was going to go get in line early. And I went to Bellevue Square Mall, went to KB Toys as I was wont to do when it opened. And I found the first, I believe it was 8, as we as we decided upon last night. Let's see. He-Man, Skeletor, Teela, Man-at-Arms, Beastman, Stratos, Merman, and the sci-fi guy, Red Laser Gun. God, I can't. Those are the first, and I should have known this because we dealt with it last night on Midnight Metal, but those are the first He-Man figures, and those are the ones that I bought. And I'd never seen them before. I'd never heard of He-Man before. But I bought those figures because they were pretty freaking cool. I mean, that was weeks after Conan the Barbarian had come out, which I believe they actually did make Conan toys using He-Man figures as their base. But I bought the He-Man figures because I thought they were cool, and I really loved the strange cross of Sumerian fantasy action characters and science fiction. And that was very apparent to me. Like, to me, Man-at-Arms was a technologically based badass Italian because he had the mustache. And then, of course, you had it's God, what was the name of that figure with the red? You know what? Forgive me. It's going to drive me crazy if I don't find out. I need to know the name. I know everyone in the chat's going, it's this. I just want to say I need to know. The He-Man Wikipedia. I'm going to the He-Man Wikipedia. Let's see. Oh, of course, it's not going to say. First, I just want to know, what were the first 8 figures? I want to know the one outlier. Why do you have to give me a whole history? I guess because there's a lot to know. How many original He-Man figures are there? He-Man Masters. Oh, God, it keeps giving me the same shit. Why can I find what they were? What were they? What was the name of that figure? Oh, wait, hang on. Maybe I'll find out. No, I just want to know the goddamn names of the figures. Hang on, I'll find it. You guys know what it is. You know, and I know I'm being a douche right now. It's not fake or it's not any of that crap. I'm looking for the frickin'. I can't find it. Anyway, you know what it is. Red, laser gun, whatever. So there was those 8 figures. I bought them. I loved them, but in 1982, in June of 82, I just had my 13. I just turned 15. So I thought the figures were cool. Never watched the animated series. I think I might have watched one episode, and now I'll tell you, I was too old. The He-Man series was not made for 15-year-olds, and that's not to take it away from any 15-year-olds who liked it. I mean, I never paid much attention because it was very, let's call it simplistic. And yet I was aware of the franchise because it became huge. But He-Man, and again, the G.I. Joe animated series, the He-Man TV series was designed as an extended commercial. It was really the first extended commercial for a toy line. And I understood that. And it was readily apparent that that's what it was all about. So I never watched the He-Man series. I liked the figures. That was about it. And and there were things they would put out, like I thought Battle Cat was cool, and the Wind Rider, that ship was cool. The new one they made, 10 years ago or something, that was badass. The classic figure line they did. Now, I did see Masters of the Universe in 1987, but at the time when it came out, even I liked the effects. I loved Frank Langella as Skeletor. I thought Dolph Lundgren playing He-Man was great. I mean, what a perfect specimen. Not exactly the best movie in the world. I liked that Robert Duncan McNeil was in it. Courtney Cox was in it. Courtney Cox later was the very first celebrity I met a year later in California in the summer of 1982. Where did I meet her? I met her at an ATM, the Bank of America ATM right across from the Beverly Center. She was standing in front of me. I didn't know. I'm just waiting to use the ATM. She turns around. I'm like, oh, my God, you're Courtney Cox. You were in Masters of the Universe. She couldn't have been more delightful. She smiled. She gave me a few minutes, time of day. We had a nice conversation. Boy, was she cute. Didn't put on airs. She didn't have to talk to me at all. And I think I told her that I just moved to L.A. from Seattle. I was going to USC Film School in the fall. And she was like, oh, really? She was so nice. The only reason I knew who she was because of Masters of the Universe. In 2011, 2012, I started working on the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-ray documentaries with Roger Lay Jr. One of his very good friends, Corey Landis, and Roger Lay were working on a He-Man documentary called Toy Masters. And it was all about the rift that had occurred with the two gentlemen that they both claimed creator, Roger Sweet being one of them. They both claimed the creatorship of the He-Man franchise. Now, for those of you who don't know, so Toy Masters, because of rights issues and all kinds of things, has never come out. But I worked on it as an editor with Roger, and I worked on it for a long time, and I immersed myself in He-Man lore back in 2012. We were accepted to Canada's prestigious Fantasia Film Festival, and we took Toy Masters and showed it in a theater to people. And it was I loved it. I love going to film festivals with work that we've done. I'm still guilty that there was one media there was an unlinked piece of media in the finished version that I still to this day cringe at, because I had to get on a plane and I was like working until the very last minute till I'm like, I have to go to the airport now to get it done. So Roger, Corey, I apologize. So I worked on it and I found out all kinds of things, and I was steeped in the history of the He-Man franchise, and I watched a lot of episodes of classic He-Man, and I also learned all about the whole history of different iterations of He-Man all the way up until 2012. And I found it fascinating. And it's a franchise that I have no emotional attachment to, and I honestly don't care. To be honest, I don't care. However, in working on Toy Masters, working with Roger and Corey, these dudes were steeped. Like, they loved He-Man. They loved, my God, the way I wax rhapsodic about Star Trek, even though Roger did too. But, He-Man was their jam. They were younger than me. They were right in that sweet spot where those figures, like, for me, I thought the figures were actually cool. I liked the fact that they were as wide as they were tall. I liked the the crazy cross between medieval fantasy and science fiction. And remember, at the time, there was no show. These were toys, and the show was made later, and the toys were really cool. Like, I loved the toys, but no one knew anything about them. Like, okay, there was Skeletor. I mean, what did he do? What did he want? Why was he upset? And the toys, you could take the power, the swords and put them together. I thought that was cool. But they weren't particularly well-detailed figures, but there was something about the figures that I loved. That's why I bought them. Before I went to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which, by the way, I saw 4 times in one day. Saw 4 times that day, all the showings. And they showed a laser light show in the theater. They would show the trailer with this laser light show. It was cool. But I had under my seat, I had stuffed my 8 He-Man figures that I had bought. And I took them home. I opened them up. I think they came with comic books, at the time, which were cool because I was a big comic collector and all that. But I loved them. And I set them up on my shelf, and okay, this is like Merman works for Skeletor, but Man-at-Arms is working for He-Man. And I guess one of them was an outlier, the sci-fi guy, and I can't remember his name. Why can't I remember his name? All of you in the chat, what was his name? Come on, what was the sci-fi guy's name? I don't know, man. I don't. But anyway, I had him. I love those figures. I thought they were really cool. But I'm like, I might have dipped into the animated series. I just thought, I'm like, this is for 8-year-olds. It's not my thing. I'm a little older now, and I wasn't beneath. But to me, even when I was a kid, I was not a fan of animation. I loved Johnny Quest. I loved the Star Trek animated series. I did love things like Thundar the Barbarian. And, of course, I enjoyed the Jetsons and the Flintstones and stuff like that. But I was not a real Saturday morning cartoon guy. So I was already not somebody who loved animation. I liked Disney animation. But I didn't, and I love foreign animation, like Fantastic Planet. When I was 9, I'm like, oh my God, until my mom pulled me away, and I had to wait to see it later. But I do like animation, but He-Man was just this simplistic good versus evil. I never got into it. But when I worked on the Toy Masters documentary and learned about the rift amongst these two men, and then, of course, people that worked at the toy company at the time, the creation of He-Man, it was fascinating, and so I watched some He-Man episodes, and then I was still like, oh my God, this is just not good. But that does not take away from the fact that there's a whole strata of fandom, Transformers and He-Man, totally passed me by. I have a complete blind spot for He-Man. It means nothing to me. When I think about He-Man, I think about meeting Courtney Cox at an ATM in 1988 on Beverly Boulevard, and that to me is the extent. And I like the movie. Richard Edlund's 65mm visual effects, pretty cool. I really enjoyed that aspect of the film, and I really like Frank Langella as Skeletor. But I have no cut to like the last couple days. Thursday night and yesterday, the new He-Man series on Netflix has dropped. Which, by the way, I have to say the trailers intrigued me, especially after working on Toy Masters. Even though you haven't seen it, it intrigued me. I'm like, okay, this looks pretty dope. I like the character designs. The thing I liked about the He-Man characters back in 1982, 39 years ago, were there. They were there in the animation. I like the animation style. Having just worked on, and still am working on Dota, Dragon's Blood, I've taken particular interest in a Netflix animated series for obvious reasons. You want to see what the competition's doing. So I have yet to see Kevin Smith's He-Man series, and knowing nothing about, like, I understand, I get it, I understand, I know Eternia, I know the characters Tila, I know Evelyn, I know Man-at-Arms and Beastman and Stratos and Fakor, is it Fakor? Manny Faces, all that stuff. I know it. I don't care. It's not part of my thing. So anyway, man. What I have been fascinated about is the online outrage against this show. And everyone's like, the same complaints that a lot of fandom has for a lot of things, which, by the way, are not unwarranted. But I because I don't have a vested interest in it, it is something I'm kind of watching from afar, and I'm I'm more fascinated by the outrage toward this show than the show itself. Haven't watched it, but I have been watching the outrage. And it's been fascinating to me, and I find it to be an interesting case study. But I wanted to share this article with you that dropped. It dropped. When did it drop? It dropped today, I believe. It was written by Adam Very. It was in Variety. And I wanted to share it before we get started. Kevin Smith made Netflix's Masters of the Universe revelation specifically to please He-Man fans. Some got mad anyway. By the way, spoiler warning. It says right here at the top of the article, do not read if you've not seen the first 5 episodes of Masters of the Universe Revelation, streaming now on Netflix. So if this is a spoiler thing and Netflix, the He-Man series on Netflix is your jam, please come back, I don't know, in a half an hour, maybe. In early 2019, Kevin Smith nearly turned down He-Man. In early 2019, the iconoclastic filmmaker, podcast host, and foul-mouthed bon vivant, I'd like to think of myself as that as well, got a call from his agent. Mattel, the toy company, wanted to meet, but they required that Smith sign an NDA first. So Smith asked where their offices were located. He's like, El Segundo. And I'm like, fucking Santa Monica? I'm not going out there, Smith said. So I passed. And then they called back. And he was like, they said they'd come to your house. And I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, send them over. I'll talk whatever they want to talk about. Sometime later, Rob David, vice president of content creative at Mattel Television, rolled up to Smith's Hollywood Hills home. After Smith signed the NDA, David explained why he was there. He wanted Smith to help him make a Netflix series based on the 1980s animated kid show, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Anyone familiar with Smith's sui generis oeuvre of profane indies like Clerks, Chasing Amy, and Dogma might be surprised that, you know how I am with French words, might be surprised that Mattel would think of Smith as the right creative shepherd for an earnest sword and sorcery property about a hulking Adonis in a furry Speedo and a chest plate. Smith certainly was. I never would have put that together, he said. He was a young teenager during He-Man's run from 83 to 85, and he wasn't exactly a diehard fan. Quote, I almost hate-watched it because I was like, this show's for babies, he said. They have one of the baddest-ass villains in history, Skeletor, visually incredible, and all they did was somersault and not really fight. Nobody ever got stabbed, but it was the 80s, so you watched everything that was on. David, however, had a specific pitch for Kevin Smith. Mattel was already working with Netflix on a CG animated He-Man series that would reboot and update the property for a new generation of children. And the company was developing a live-action feature film adaptation that would also bring He-Man's world of Eternia into a 21st century cinematic context. Now, I have to say something. I read a He-Man screenplay. I believe it was called Grayskull. And it was written by Mark Prasevich. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. It was fucking incredible. I loved the Grayskull screenplay that was written by Mark Prasevich. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. It was great. I'm like, well, this shit should get made. Because this was a fucking epic fantasy screenplay. I have the scripts, as a matter of fact. Let me do a cursory search of my computer. Because, I mean, this is a long time ago. Let's see. Let me see. I might not. It might be too old. It's searching the Mac. I have lots of old screenplays. Apparently, Grayskull is not one of them. I think I might or hang on a second. Grayskull. Maybe it's different. Nope. It's not on this computer, but I have it somewhere. I think I have a hard copy. But anyway, I really like that script. But David and Netflix's director of original series, Ted Bizelli, had hit upon a third approach to the property, a show that would be for those adult fans who grew up loving He-Man, which, by the way, I think is a particularly good idea. So why wouldn't you want to do that? Why suddenly my computer is not responding? Hang on, I don't know why that's the case, but for whatever reason, my computer is now stuck. I don't know why it's stuck. Let me just refresh. Oh, web page is not responding. Visit page. I'm going to visit page again. Let me see if I can get this back. Okay. Here we go. Now I can continue to read this article. David, however, had a specific pitch for Smith. Mattel was already working on a Netflix CG animated He-Man series that would reboot and update the property for a new generation of children, and the company was developing a live-action film. Actually, I already read that. Ted Biazelli had hit upon a third approach to the property, a show that would be for those adult fans who grew up loving He-Man, David said. Not to even reimagine, let's just do a direct continuation of the classic 80s era. All right, dude, that's pretty ballsy. I'm down with that. That could be cool. Separate from his feature film work, Smith had authored comic book runs of Marvel's Daredevil and DC's Green Arrow in the late 1990s and early 2000s that David greatly admired for their fealty to the subject matter, with none of Smith's signature dick and fart jokes. He'd taken some of the great stuff that Frank Miller had done with Daredevil and found a way to honor that but build on it, David said. David and Biazelli wanted Smith to do the same with He-Man. Take the show from the 1980s and continue that story with those characters, only now for an adult audience. Finally, He-Man and Skeletor could really do battle, and one or both could get stabbed. Smith loved the idea. Biazelli's like, I yearned to watch the show I thought I was watching in childhood. That's what I'm looking for here. The same show, but people can die. Can you do that? Smith said. And I was like, that's the only thing I can do. Honestly, if it had been anything else outside of that, if they were like, we want you to reinvent this for the modern age, that would have scared me off creatively because I'm not that inventive, Smith continued. And also because I know what a fan base reacts like when they don't get the thing they grew up watching. You think, I'm going to be the fall guy for that? If I'm involved in a thing, it's going to be true to what it is. It's going to be true to the franchise. And yet, a little more than 24 hours after the debut of Masters of the Universe Revelation on Netflix, and despite near universally glowing notices from critics, the show has been review bombed by users posting to Rotten Tomatoes and the IMDb. The general consensus among those upset, Smith has indeed not given fans the thing they grew up watching. Namely, he had not given them He-Man. By any reasonable measure, Smith, David, and the rest of the creative team were successful in achieving what they set out to do. Make a series that looks and feels like a sophisticated adult continuation of the He-Man animated series from the 1980s. Beloved sci-fi composer Bear McCreary wrote a sweeping score that takes the story seriously. Several locations from the original show are smartly utilized, and nearly 24 characters, Trapjaw, Triclops, Stinkor, make memorable appearances. The animation, led by directors Patrick Stannard and Adam Connerow from Netflix's Castlevania, pays loving attention to the design aesthetic of the original. Characters drive vehicles that evoke the tie-in He-Man toy line while upgrading it for an adult eye and sensibility. One example, while He-Man and his alter ego Prince Adam are still voiced by the same actor, this time by Supergirl's Chris Wood, Adam is now a scrawnier, more normal-looking young man instead of a hulking Adonis who looks exactly like He-Man in regular clothing. In the first episode, however, Smith, David, and the rest of the creative team made a bold creative decision. He-Man seemingly dies, as does Skeletor, voiced by Mark Hamill, the result of a cataclysmic battle that also leaves Eternia devoid of all magic. While He-Man appears in flashbacks for the rest of the first half of the season, he's missing in action from the main story. Instead, He-Man's friends and even some of his enemies have to figure out how to bring magic back to Eternia and save all of existence in doing so. In this quest, they're led reluctantly by He-Man's former loyal compatriot Teela, voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who still feels devastated and betrayed as the only one in He-Man's inner circle who never knew he was Prince Adam. How could you not know? Even I knew he was. In speaking with Variety about these choices, it's clear that the creators and cast of Revelation only ever wanted to please fans of the show by getting to do the things the original never could. Real stakes, real consequences, with nuanced characters imbued with genuine pathos and psychological maturity. But it's also clear that Revelation is a textbook case of the precarious tightrope walk of trying to please fans of a legacy franchise while also trying to avoid merely regurgitating what came before, especially given that the world of extreme online fandoms almost always exclusively... Where's the rest of this article? It's apparently disappeared, and I don't know why. Oh, man. Some weird thing happened, and come on, man. Okay, where was I? I don't even know. Here we go. I found it. In speaking with Variety about these choices, it's clear that the creators and cast of Revelation only ever wanted to please fans of the show by getting to do the things the original never could, real stakes and real consequences with nuanced characters imbued with genuine pathos and psychological maturity. But it's also clear that Revelation is a textbook case of the precarious tightrope walk of trying to please fans of a legacy franchise while also trying to avoid merely regurgitating what came before, especially given that the world of extreme online fandoms, almost always exclusively driven by men, while the show is called He-Man, have not responded well when a property previously led by a man suddenly has a woman at its center. After Wood won the role of He-Man, I went for it, just screaming, "I have the power!" in our closet, hoping that my family wasn't thinking I was losing it, he said with a laugh, discovering in the very first script that his character appears to die. And it was indeed a shock. I read it and I was like, wait, is that how this happens, he said? Is there more? As anyone who has seen all 5 episodes of Revelation knows, there was more for Wood to do, especially in episode 5, since neither Skeletor nor Prince Adam really died. But David's initial pitch to Smith kept Adam alive the entire time. In the midst of a massive battle at Castle Grayskull, Skeletor breaks the vessel containing all magic on Eternia, and He-Man is forced to split the Sword of Power in 2 in order to contain the ensuing explosion. In David's version, Adam survived, robbed of his ability to become He-Man. He spends the rest of the series figuring out how to build himself back up to his former glory. Kevin thought that was terrific, said David, and then he one-upped me and said, what if we don't just break the Sword of Power? What if we actually break Adam too? What if he dies? When we flash forward a few years, we really get to explore that. Also, what is it like for a world without He-Man? In breaking the story for Revelation, Smith said David pulled out books of lore for He-Man and Eternia created by Mattel over the decades since the toy was first created. Between David's commitment to the history of He-Man and Biazelli's bone-deep love for the original show, Smith felt like he had guardrails keeping him from going too far afield. Besides, his mandate was to make a He-Man show where the characters could actually die. What better way to make that clear than killing the show's main hero and villain from the jump? All we have to do is not disavow anything, Smith said. Nobody's saying, hey man, everything you knew about He-Man was wrong. It's like, no, everything you knew was absolutely right, and now this is what happened when they finally had their epic battle, and what happened after that. Even though this is a love letter to the 1980s version of Masters of the Universe, we didn't want to rest on that, added David. In order for something to be alive, it's got to have the capacity to surprise you. It has to have the capacity to grow. Once Wood understood the approach, he loved it. It was jarring, but in a really amazing way, because Skeletor and He-Man, there was no real urgency or life or death stakes to their battles in the original, he said. With He-Man's death locked in, Smith looked at the characters who were left in Eternia, who could drive the story for the next 4 episodes. One jumped to the fore. Teela, I was particularly interested in because she's been fucking lied to her entire life, Smith said, and that to me was drama. In episode 2, Teela is working as a mercenary for hire, and her disillusionment with He-Man and the alienation from magic work as a kind of allegory for the cynicism of adulthood overshadowing the wonders of childhood. She was the perfect vehicle for what Revelation was trying to do. Strip away everything the heroes cared about and get at the heart of who they really are and what makes them heroic. My favorite movies are The Empire Strikes Back and The Wrath of Khan, said David. The hero gets really hit hard, and then the story becomes about how the hero gets back up again and better and stronger than ever. In basically stripping away all the comforts of the hero took for granted, the hero reveals to him or herself what truly makes them strong inside and then have to rebuild. We thought by having an unexpected character go on that journey in real time with the audience, he continued, we would be able to really hit just how important He-Man is and how important those themes are. When Sarah Michelle Gellar was first approached about playing Teela, however, she wasn't sure she wanted it. I thought it'd be a very small role at first because just looking at He-Man, I didn't even really necessarily remember her, she said. I mean, maybe vaguely, and then I started reading the scripts and I was like, oh, she is the show. Okay, this is new. In truth, Gellar didn't pay very much attention to the original He-Man. You're not alone, Sarah. For the simple reason that the entire world was telling her the show is only for boys, and it was. I think what's interesting about the original incarnation was it was very gender specific, she said. There wasn't something for me. There wasn't a character that I saw myself in, and I think that's sort of then you realize it's not about gender, right? It's not necessarily boy-girl, but it's about seeing yourself in someone in it, Gellar said. So what's wonderful about what they did with Revelation is not only do I see myself in a lot of these female characters, but I also see myself for the first time in He-Man and Skeletor. They're much closer to the characters that I think we can understand and feel like we have something in common with, not that I like to think I have too much in common with Skeletor. It was that opportunity to humanize and complicate established characters that Smith was most excited about, especially since it gave him a chance to put into practice a decade's worth of personal observations of the most successful attempt at fan service in Hollywood history, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know how to Marvelize this shit, Kevin Smith said. They reserved me my childhood with fresh recipes, and I get to eat the same meals that made me happy as a kid all over again, but it's a trick. I've been studying Kevin Feige like crazy for 10 years. They give you something that you feel looks like your childhood, but when you go back to compare it with your childhood, it's better. And that's what we did here. Some fans, though, just want their childhood again. Smith spoke with Variety weeks before Revelation's debut, but his sensitivity to fan reactions meant he was closely monitoring Twitter for how people were talking about the various trailers for Revelation, so he'd already picked up on the discontent with the understanding that Teela was going to be far more important a character on his show. I know there are some people that are like, hey man, this show's woke, he said. I'm like, all right, great. Then so is the original cartoon. We're fucking sequelizing. Go watch it again. There are girls in every episode. Deal with it. Never one to mince his words, Smith couldn't hide his frustration with fans taking issue with a show that, at that point, they hadn't seen yet. It's been interesting seeing who truly is a hardcore fan, he says, because everybody that's like, oh man, there's not enough He-Man or something like that, doesn't understand the show that we based it on. There were episodes where he lost the sword and he never became He-Man. It wasn't like He-Man always saved the day. His friends helped him. That was the fucking point of the show. Now that the show has premiered, there is no denying that He-Man isn't around all that much, but some of the backlash could also be a misread of the final moments of the first half of the series, which hinges on a massive cliffhanger. In their quest to unify the Sword of Power to bring magic back to Eternia, Teela and her friends discover Prince Adam is alive in Preternia, a kind of afterlife for Eternia's fallen heroes. In a moment of selflessness, knowing that he can never return to Preternia again, Adam decides to follow his friends back to Castle Grayskull. But once they do, and use the reunified Sword of Power to return magic to Grayskull, Skeletor also emerges and literally impales Adam in the back before he can become He-Man again. Then Skeletor takes the Sword of Power, raises it to the sky, and becomes Skelegod, a master of the universe. End of episode. It could not be easy to assume, or it could be easy to assume that Skeletor has killed Prince Adam, but he did not. Adam's not dead, he's very wounded, said Wood, and if you want to light the whole world on fire in terms of destroying a fandom, you'd take He-Man out and be like, that's it, he's gone, bye. Now what they've done is they've found a really interesting way to turn the dynamics of the show on its head and raise the stakes to the point that the original never saw. Smith was blunter. I see people online go, hey man, they're getting rid of He-Man, he said. Like, you really fucking think Mattel Television, who hired me and paid me money, wants to do a fucking Masters of the Universe show without He-Man? Grow the fuck up, man. Like, that blew my mind. Bunch of people being like, oh, I smell it. This is a bait and switch. Part 2 of Revelation, which will premiere likely later this year or early next year, will actually explore David's original pitch, with Prince Adam the one who has to recover from an almost debilitating blow. A lot of Part 2 is a world in which Skeletor has the power. Then we get to say, well, what made Adam special, David said. What does it mean to have the power? What made Adam the person who is most worthy to be He-Man? I will tell you this, Adam's story is not done, and it never will be. Not saying what happens to him, but I'm just saying the stories continue. Wood has seen very rough versions of Part 2, and his face lit up when describing them. To anyone who might be upset or frustrated with the end of Part 1, he had this advice. I would say keep watching, with the biggest wink that an audio-only interview can give. In a world that's filled with magic and supernatural powers, anything is possible. Even, perhaps, conquering angry fans. Yo, man. The vitriolic reaction to the He-Man show has made me see myself. And I think in the last 36 hours, I've done a lot of self-examination. I've been delving in to my own bad self. Why? Well, because obviously there's a certain franchise that I love that I now hate. I've hated it for 12 years. I mean, I don't hate the franchise. I don't hate the player. I hate the game. But in this case, I hate the players. I don't hate the game. And I have hated what Star Trek has become. Now, one of the things I thought was interesting when I was reading this article, it made me think about the Star Trek franchise. And when Star Trek the Motion Picture was coming out in 1979, I was 12. I've been watching Star Trek since I was 5. It was the single most important thing in the world to me. I could tell you more about Star Trek than I could tell you about American history, than I could tell you about my parents, than I could tell you about my sister. I knew more about Star Trek than anything. As a matter of fact, I spent most of my waking hours contemplating the Star Trek universe. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, everything. It was everything to me. But other than the errant novel that would come out, you know, and when Kathleen Sky's Vulcan came out with Spock with some hot chick on the cover with a phaser pointed down to a bunch of giant ants, I would buy that and gleefully read it and think I hated it. But I mean, this is bullshit. But it was all right because it was new Star Trek, and that's all I was getting. Star Trek was done. After the animated series, there was going to be no new Star Trek. So when Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, it was the second coming of this thing that I loved. I mean, it literally, look, I'm not a religious person, but if I was a Christian, I would equate it to the fact that the resurrection has come, Christ lives again, he's back on earth, and whatever. And I don't mean to denigrate anyone who's deeply, devoutly religious. I don't mean to say I'm doing this in a humorous way, but the idea that Star Trek, it was the second coming. And for me, it was a huge deal. I was beginning my teen years. I was popping giant pussy zits on the tip of my nose. Things were changing for me, man. And so to get Star Trek the Motion Picture was a hugely important deal. Now, everyone knows Star Trek the Motion Picture is still my favorite Star Trek movie. A lot of it has to do with when I saw it and how I saw it and why I saw it and what it meant to me. But Star Trek the Motion Picture was not anything really like the original series except in its story. And people are, oh, it's too much like the... No. The thing that I loved about Star Trek the Motion Picture was the characters were not who I remembered. Sure, William Shatner was now Admiral Kirk, and Spock was there, and McCoy was there. They were not happy people. And here I was, oh my God, it's the Return of Star Trek, it's the Enterprise. The Enterprise was certainly happy because it had never looked better. She was all like, look Look at how good I look. But Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were not the same people. As a matter of fact, they weren't even pleasant. Kirk was a dick. He was obsessed. He was a dick. Spock had just failed miserably. When did Spock ever fail? And McCoy had been a curmudgeonly doctor because he'd like gone back to Yonata to hang out with Natira and study for breeding medicine, whatever the fuck he was doing. The last place he wanted to be was on the Enterprise. Scotty was like in the middle of it all because he'd been working for Captain Decker, and he had to like, okay, Kirk is Kirk, and Uhura's like, okay, and Chekhov and Sulu, but nobody was happy. They weren't happy. They were different people. Now, my first reaction as a religious zealot Star Trek fan, I fucking loved it. I loved it because I was getting older, moving into my teen years. I'm like, wow. Like, these characters they were recognizably my heroes, but they were in a different place. They were not having a good time. And, they brought in this Lieutenant Ilea. My oath of celibacy is on record. I'm like, boom, chicka, boom, boom. You were Miss India. Why would anyone want to have an oath of celibacy? I mean, come on. I was like, Kirk, and you should get busy. That wasn't going to happen. She was a love interest of Decker. I'm like, what the hell, man? This hot Miss India, and she was smoking hot, even bald. I'm like, come on now. Nope, none of that. Very different. My man was too old. He was now in middle age. He doesn't get to cat around with hot alien women that exude pheromones and will never take advantage of a sexually immature species. Let me tell you, please take advantage of me. Drive me home. Show Bobby what's up, because I would like to learn from you. Didn't happen. Kirk did not. There was no joy there. She was in love with Decker. I know it's a bit of an aside. Anyway, so it was way different. It was not what I expected. And really what Star Trek The Motion Picture was about, that whole movie, and especially in the director's edition, thank God it's being restored in 4K, the movie is really about, ultimately, it is about family, friendship, and it's also about humanity, specifically in the fact that Spock, for the very first time, he failed the ultimate test of Vulcan logic. And he was a seeker. He was searching. He's been searching his whole life. Vulcan logic failed him, and he failed Vulcan logic. What does he discover in this movie? In encountering V'ger, the greatest example of logic in the universe, this machine, like, you can't argue with V'ger. V'ger's empty inside. As Spock says in the theatrical version, he takes Kirk's hand. This simple feeling is beyond V'ger's comprehension. And I'm sitting there as a 12-year-old, I'm like, holy shit. This is like revelatory shit. And everyone's like, oh, Rob, it's the slow motion picture. It's just a retelling of The Changeling. And I'm like, no way, man. This shit is fucking pro-fucking-found, man. I was like, in! And I'm watching Spock have this amazing revelatory thing. And if you watch the director's cut, he even cries. He's crying. For us, Spock, no, I weep for V'ger as I would a brother. I mean, this shit was taking these characters to places I'd never seen. And as the biggest Star Trek fanatical fundamentalist zealot, I'm watching this shit, and my mind was blown. I'm sitting in that theater as a 12-year-old going, my favorite franchise has taken these characters into middle age, make them into people I don't know, and yet I do know them, and given me profundity I would never have expected. And that, by the way, continued on with Star Trek II. I mean, even though they replayed certain beats that were in Star Trek The Motion Picture, like an unfulfilled Kirk, but Star Trek The Motion Picture to me was a revelation. And it showed me that you could take a franchise and do something new and different with it. And I know there was a lot of production problems. They were locked into. I get all that. I have the book over there. I read Return to Tomorrow. You should all buy it and read it. It's amazing. One of the great making of books ever. Return to Tomorrow, that was published by Taylor White, Creature Features, and Lucas Kendall. It's one of the most amazing making of books ever. Read it. But what it taught me, what Star Trek The Motion Picture taught me, was to always look at my favorite franchises and look at them in different ways. So I am, because of my experience with Star Trek The Motion Picture, I am open-minded. I know people are like, wait, what? You, Rob, are open-minded about Star Trek? Yes. when it's good. When the people that are creating it or writing it are presenting me things that are truthful and real. They're not sliding back and giving me regurgitated science fiction concepts that were already dealt with in the series, in 1966. Like, why having an android body isn't any good. 1966, but oh no. Back in 2019, let's have Picard embrace an android body. No, you don't understand. Star Trek already showed why that's not the way to go. They did it in 66, but now you're going back because you never watched What Are Little Girls Made Of, you producers. You don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. That's why Star Trek sucks now. Why it's terrible. It is disingenuous. It is poorly written because no one has watched the show. They might have delved into it. They'll read like, the BuzzFeed, the top 20 Star Trek episodes. I just got a job in the show. I've never seen Star Trek, but I'm going to go watch these 20 episodes. That's what modern Star Trek, that's what Star Trek to me has felt like since 2009. It feels like I'm watching Star Trek is made by people that haven't internalized it, haven't watched it, don't know about it. Almost as if I was hired to make a He-Man show. So cut to, I've been reading all about the He-Man series. And I read even this article, listening to what people are saying about the He-Man show. And I wonder, and I watched yesterday, I was watching Gary and the crew on Friday Night Tights, which is a show I enjoy watching, and I like all the people on it. But they were going after He-Man hard, leaning into it hard. And I completely understand where they were coming from. I do. But I would ask this question. With this series, the people that are making it clearly have a plan. Now, I read this, again, from an outside perspective. They had a plan. They had a conception for the show. Now, to me, like Star Trek the Motion Picture, which was not a retread, even though, well, Rob, the plot is the same. It actually really isn't. There are similar elements, like the changeling. Okay, there's an artificial life form coming back to find its creator, which is, I get that. I understand where people are coming from. But the show, the movie itself is really about our characters trying to find themselves. And the idea is their place is on the Enterprise together. That's where they're strongest. That's where they're complete. When Spock takes Kirk's hand, literally takes Kirk's hand and says, this simple feeling is beyond V'ger's comprehension. Spock understands while he's doing that this is my place. I'm supposed to be here with you, Jim. And it's a very life-affirming, interesting film, writ large on the big screen, very different from the Star Trek that has come before. And now I wonder, is this new He-Man series, knowing where it's going to go and now reading where they're coming from, to me it seems like the reading that Teela and He-Man's friends are the stars of the show, and I was like, oh, they made the women characters. And I'm like, look, man, you're making a He-Man show. And ultimately, you destroy He-Man to bring him back, if that's indeed what they're doing. That, to me, could be great. Is it like the He-Man show that we all know and remember? Well, no, because they're making one long extended story over 10 episodes, or maybe even longer. I don't know. But just reading this, I'm thinking to myself, now, these are creators that seem to know and have thought about what they're doing. Now, it might not be readily apparent, but what I wonder about is has fandom become so jaded that we have failed to like let's allow, look, there are certain things that I think were modern fandom that we get mad about. Let's just go to The Last Jedi. First of all, to me, the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy, I was never a fan of The Force Awakens. None of that shit made sense. It didn't make sense. It was corporate mandated. We need a reboot. And you're like, well, then don't call it Episode 7. Because if you're watching Episode 6 to Episode 7, all of your characters, all of them, are idiots because they've allowed the First Order to rise and Starkiller Base to be made. It's bad writing. Nobody came in there. I've never seen J.J. Abrams give me a fucking timeline of what he thought when he was writing the script with Lawrence Kasdan. Show me an article that explains to me why you have the galaxy in the state it's in. Now, don't tell me to read a novel. Don't tell me to consult some visual dictionary. I have all this shit. It's all right here. I've read it. I know. Still doesn't make a lick of sense. If you're going to do a Star Wars movie, you go from Return of the Jedi to Force Awakens. Everyone's a douche because they've allowed the universe to go to shit. And you wonder, wow, these characters that I've known and loved from Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, they just became incompetent boobs. And every character, why is Han Solo, why is the Millennium Falcon sitting on a planet for years? Why? Why would Han Solo, I mean, immediately you've turned Han Solo into a monumental douche. The thing that matters most to him, other than Chewbacca and Princess Leia, is the goddamn Millennium Falcon, and apparently it's been sitting on a planet for years. You've made him a douche. Then you made him a deadbeat dad. Then you made him a fucking idiot. That's horrible shit. And by the way, that's The Force Awakens. Fuck that movie. I don't care what you say about Last Jedi. Fuck Force Awakens. That's the real culprit. That's the horrible, awful shit that sent the Disney trilogy into a spiral of god-awful storytelling, just like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies. I mean, ultimately, Star Trek Beyond celebrated its 5th anniversary. A movie that is about a black man who is defeated by 300-year-old white rappers. Think about it. That's the movie they made. Well done. Horrible shit. Now, I can't say the same for He-Man because I read about this stuff and I haven't, like, Adam dies twice, He-Man and Skeletor, everything in this thing makes sense to me. I'm like, that's interesting, especially if they bring it back and the back half could be great. And yet, the vitriol and the anger about He-Man it's all, and it might be well-founded. I don't know shit about He-Man. I don't. So people would say, well, Rob, why are you doing this stream? Well, because I found it fascinating, and the show's called Robservations, and I've been thinking about the reaction to He-Man, and I've been thinking about this, and I only think about it because I did spend months of my life steeped in the lore of He-Man when I worked on the Toy Masters documentary back in 2012. And I was looking at it more from an academic standpoint, and even having conversations with Roger and Corey about the various eras in the He-Man history into the 90s and the aughts, which was fascinating. But what I do wonder about this show, and what I wonder about fandom in general, is like, even me. I mean, I hate modern Star Trek. But that said, I've come out against their new show, Star Trek Prodigy, because there's not a human character in it except a hologram of Janeway. I did watch the Star Trek Prodigy preview, and I was like, you know what? This looks kind of good. Like, I fucking hated Lower Decks. I thought it was easy, stupid Star Trek humor, like, guffaw, let's make fun of it. It's not exactly, that humor was not exactly, say, something like Arthur or Tootsie humor. It was just easy humor, and it just seemed, we have to make characters like this that aren't Starfleet characters that we would recognize and make them funny. I get it, because fandom loves lowbrow humor. I get it. We always have. I hated Lower Decks. I fucking hated it. I wanted to punch the screen. And the season 2 trailer did not change my mind. But I watched the Prodigy trailer, and I'm like, well, it's weird to see Star Trek with no human beings in it, because I think it's not Star Trek. It's about humanity. But okay. But there was something about it that I found vaguely, if it's not necessarily Star Trekian, more Guardians of the Galaxian or whatever. I'm like, all right, I'll tune in. I always tune in. Star Trek is always, I'm an easy lay when it comes to Star Trek. I mean, even if you give me a half-assed hand job, I'm there for you. Unless it's really, really, really bad. And that's what Star Trek has been since 2009. It's been bad. So really bad. So He-Man, I'm going to go watch a show. And I because I don't have an attachment to He-Man at all, I want to watch it and see if I dig it. Like, I get what they're trying to do. I understand what they're trying to do, because I have the power. I've seen episodes now. I've watched those 82 episodes. I mean, my God, they don't work if you're past like 10. They just don't. And I worked on a documentary about it, and I was steeped in it. But I don't begrudge anyone who grew up with it and loved it. Transformers, He-Man, all those 80s cartoons, I was a little too old. I mean, to me, when I think about the great cartoons of my youth, Johnny Quest. Johnny Quest was my jam, man. I wanted to be Johnny Quest. I wanted to run around with Race Bannon and Dr. Benton Quest. You know, I wanted to fight giant mechanical spiders, and I wanted my friend Haji and Bandit, and I wanted to fly on that rad jet and travel around the world. I mean, that was a cartoon to me. I never would have, even as a kid, would never have been into He-Man. I never would have been into Transformers. And I also hated the toys from Transformers because they were ripping off Macross toys and other Japanese toys that they were repackaging as Transformers. But I don't begrudge anybody who loves Transformers because they're badass. I mean, I love the Cybertron. I love the whole mythology. It's cool. I love Bumblebee. I even love I love Transformers 1 and 3. So I can get to love these things. But as far as this goes with He-Man, all of this ire and all that, I'm fascinated by it because what they've done sounds really interesting to me from a storytelling standpoint. And I haven't seen a lot of that addressed online. I'm seeing the idea that, okay, they've elevated the female characters, which, listening to this, I mean, even I had figures. I did have, Tila was one of the first figures I bought. And I did buy an Evil Lynn. I did buy, like, Manny Faces and stuff. I didn't buy all of them, and I never had a Battle Cat, and I never had the Wind Rider and any of that shit, but I had the figures. Anyway, there you go. That's my thoughts, my ruminations. Probably not, one of my best riffs on something, but still, thought about it. Hassan Chavez sent me a 5-cent super chat. And first of all, kudos to you for that, which means, when you send super chats to people, YouTube takes 50% of your super chats. So you just sent me 2.5 cents. And that, my friend, is baller. So here's to you. Tips are always better because you get a much bigger percentage if you send tips via PayPal. But YouTube does take 50% of super chats. So when you promote your favorite YouTubers, remember that. But Hassan, I will take... Actually, that's a 0.5 super chat. So is that? That's not even 5. No, it is 5 cents. I think it's 5 cents. So I will take your 2.5 cents, and you know what I'm going to do with it? I'm going to probably take 2.5 cents. I'll get a penny, 2 pennies, and cut one in half, and I'm going to tape it here. I'm going to have it on the wall. So I want to thank you for that because, you know what? All support's good support. Anyway, what do you guys think? I want to know, man. There's a lot of people that have been firing in chats, man. I hope. Should I duck? Should I? No. Okay, let me get into it. Let me read a few letters first before I get it, because man, you guys are coming after me, and God bless you for doing so, because I'm expecting. I want you imagination connoisseurs. I want you to come after me with guns fucking blazing. You He-Man fans, give me your best shot. Let's talk about Eternia. Tell me, why do you love He-Man so much? Why does it mean something to you? Why do you hate this new show so much? Or maybe you like it. I don't know. Let's make this the encounter group session of all encounter group sessions. I think it'll be fun. Let's see what you're saying. Enterprise HNCC 1701. H, our friend, writes in and says, Viscount Verderon Arrays. Greetings. First, did you watch a Let's Play the game of Star Trek Generations? And if so, would you mind giving me your thoughts on it? Okay, for those of you who don't know, Enterprise H, NCC 1701H, has wanted me to watch with a playthrough of the Generations video game. He's been asking me for over a year. I have not watched it. I always forget. I'm like, why do I want more Generations? Maybe he thinks it'll be better. I don't know. One day. Secondly, he says, I recently watched part 1 of the Romulan War fan film on YouTube. It may be of interest to those who wanted to see that conflict on the small screen. Keep in mind that this film uses a documentary format to tell its story. I wonder where they got that idea from. The fan film is probably better in some respects than what we would have gotten from an official production, since those often do not use the flags and names which the expanded universe gives to Federation member states. We also wouldn't be getting Masao Okazaki's Starfleet Museum ship designs. I think that if they went with Eric Jedrinson's Star Trek The Beginning, which was going to be a trilogy about the Romulan War, we might have, because he did a real deep dive. In terms of story, it seems to be drawing inspiration from the spaceflight chronology, which I love. I have my copy right over there. And FASA as to how the war starts with an attack on Starbase 1, as well as the Romulans' piracy tactics, or how Earth doesn't know the location of the Romulan homeworld. I can appreciate those things. As I mentioned previously, I am not as harsh on fan films as I am on official productions for rather obvious reasons. Still, I did have some questions, and I was waiting to see whether they get back to my longer inquiry. Whenever people mention an attack on a major world, I have to ask what their reasoning was behind the Verteron arrays and how those are being employed in their fanon, and whether they even thought about it. Well, the Verteron arrays have been shown and displayed, but that's a really good question to ask. And I think even in Jedrinson's Star Trek The Beginning script, which actually I really... Look, if someone came to me tomorrow and said, Rob, you have to come up with a Star Trek idea, you've got 24 hours, I would make Eric Jedrinson's Star Trek The Beginning script. I really like that script. I would hire him immediately to write the other two scripts and do the whole Romulan War story. And I love those. I think it's everything Star Trek has needed. It's not perfect. It needs a rewrite. He did one draft, turned it in. I'm like, brah, should have gotten made. Anyway, didn't, should have. Now we get the fucking god-awful bullshit that comes from Secret Hideout. Those people, I keep waiting. I'm like, have you ever watched Star Trek? Like, ever? Other than, like, you saw The Cage. Okay, I get that. Maybe The Menagerie. Omar, 94, writes in and says, hey, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity, this will be a very quick letter. It's good to hear how you and Elizabeth are going to be doing Whining About Movies again, as it's been a while since you've done one of those shows. Hopefully, you'll be able to find a way to maintain it with all the other shows you're doing. You appear on the John Campea Show, and you have your your YouTube channel where you're doing Robservations, The Midnighter, Fully Articulated, Midnight Metal, and Let's Get Physical Media, which comes back tomorrow. And now on top of that, you'll be doing Whining again. You don't want to get burned out since all the shows you will be doing are in close proximity to one another. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I just keep doing shows. As long as you guys watch them and you're fun to have around, which I think you kind of are, why not? Jer Maninen, who we haven't heard from in a while. Jer writes in and says, greetings from Finland, Rob. Since this letter will be quite long, I will jump right into it. As you, Rob, know, I'm an avid comic book fan ever since my parents bought me the first issue of the Spider-Man comic when I was a kid. But besides superheroes, there was one other comic I absolutely loved as a kid, and that was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I still keep those over 30-year-old comics next to my Marvel and DC comics, and actually, my very first action figure ever was the He-Man action figure. God, I wish I still had that, and the rest of the figures. Battle Cat that I got on my birthday, or the broken-winged sorceress I got from my cousin who'd grown too old to play with them, and so many others. I still have the first episode of the TV cartoon He-Man and the Diamond Ray of Disappearance on VHS, which I have to confess I still watch at least once every year. Not on VHS, but from my computer. Now, I could talk about my memories of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe at great length here, but let's just say, for a long time, they were my favorites. Now, jumping forward 30-plus years. A year ago, I heard that Kevin Smith was doing a new Masters of the Universe cartoon. There had been some comic reboots and even two seasons reboot of the cartoon over the years, but what made this one different was the fact that it was said to be a sort of sequel to the original cartoon. You can only imagine my excitement over this news. It was almost on the same level as my anticipation on the next MCU movie or Marvel series, or even about the next season of The Mandalorian. And this was further enhanced by the trailers that looked really good. So today, 10 hours before writing this letter, part 1 of the series dropped, and it was amazing. I loved it. The first episode is like most of the 80s classic cartoon episodes, except done in awesome animation style that we already witnessed in the Castlevania series. Now, after that, the story takes an interesting direction and tells a story of what if. I don't want to mention any spoilers since the series just dropped, and a lot of people probably haven't watched it yet. Too late. But I will say that for me, The series took my favorite characters from the series and explored them more deeply, giving us a good story with heart and even a very serious, sad moments, while still managing to be as goofy as the original classic cartoon at times. So after I watched the 5 episodes of part 1 in one sitting, I went online to look to see how I could get the next part of the series and what people were talking about, as I really wanted to discuss the series. But what greeted me in most forums was endless 1-line or 2-line quotes of people hating the series. And almost all of these were such that even if I questioned these people, if they bothered to watch the 5 episodes, since the things they didn't like weren't mostly even like that in the show, I've been around long enough to know that the most vocal in the sites probably represent only a small portion of the true fan base, but still it made me feel bad that so many people were trashing this series with mostly false comments, or were focusing on things that weren't even related to the episodes themselves, but were more focused on Kevin Smith. Now, there are a lot of things I would like to open up about here, about what sort of things people are saying online, but I really try and be a better man and focus only on the positives. So, as of writing this, the series has a 94% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which, after reading a couple of dozen reviews, is about how I feel about this series too. That the writers of this series are huge fans of Masters of the Universe and really wrote this as a love letter for fans. Now, the series isn't perfect, but after letting the franchise grow 30 years in my imagination, I don't think anyone wrote how the story would continue would have been perfect. But I really want to thank Kevin Smith for this one. The reason I'm writing to you this letter is that I want to say to everyone in the Post-Geek Singularity community that you really should watch this series. This series made my weekend and maybe even this summer, as all the feelings of playing with these toys, watching the old cartoon, and reading the He-Man comics came to mind. So I hope it will have the same effect for you. By the power of Grayskull, may we all have the power! Seriously, that's what it said. I don't know if he meant me to say it like that, but Jer, all the way from Finland. What a great letter. Thanks for writing that in. I appreciate it. What do you guys think? I mean, old school fan, comic books, watches the show every year. Is he wrong? He can't be wrong. That's what he thinks. Look, there are people that love Star Trek Discovery. Do I tell them they're wrong? No. Because they do love it. You can't tell somebody who likes something that they don't like it. They like it. And they're different than you. So there are people love Force Awakens. I mean, The Last Jedi I found interesting, weird. A lot of bizarre stuff in there, like this weird slow chase through space. Like, why would you want to, I don't understand. Mary Poppins, Princess Leia. There's a lot of The Last Jedi that I'm just like, not exactly the best use of storytelling. Like, you know. So I get it. The movie I hate the most, I mean, I hate The Force Awakens and I hate Rise of Skywalker. Both, I hate them more than Last Jedi. But, Jer, I want to thank you for writing in. Really good look at the show. Really appreciate your perspective. What do you guys think? Pasty Coppertop writes in. Pasty says, Rob, I am writing this letter to tell you thank you. Thanks for helping me look at movies differently. Although I'm not sure if this was a good or a bad thing. Uh-oh. I used to just watch a lot of film and I asked myself, was I entertained? That was good enough for me. Now I catch some of the flaws in movies, especially the writing and editing or flow of the movie, more than I used to. I'm still more positive than negative, but I do notice. I appreciate your open-mindedness for film. I listen to others on YouTube and podcasts, and sometimes it gets a bit too negative or rah-rah for me. Again, I'd like to thank you for lessons on movies, and no, I'm not ass-slapping you, although you're welcome to do so. But just giving you a good job. Oh, I thought introducing Magneto as a Sokovian who lost his country and now lost his son would work as a reason for him to hate. What do you think? Ooh, Kevin, I like that idea. Pasty Coppertop, that's a good reason for Magneto. I think that might be something they might want to do. Good idea. But thank you for... Look, you know, I reserve most of my hatred for Star Trek because it is deserving of my ire, and I hate it. You know, it's like watching my high school drama club make Star Trek, and they thought they were the smartest people in school, and it's like, come on, man, stop right now. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way about He-Man too. I get that, but I appreciate what you're saying. Look, to me, movies are to be studied like great literature. If you want to be a writer, you study great literature. By the way, if you want to watch Star Trek, or you want to write Star Trek or create Star Trek, you should know a lot about fucking Star Trek. Please know something, and don't just see the greatest episodes BuzzFeed told you to watch. Try and internalize it. Try and see it with better eyes. You cynical fucks. Come on now. Let's see. Gil, our friend Gil, Cardinal Sin says, Rob, you said you'd help me provide questions for Peter David, who I know virtually nothing about. How can you not know who Peter David is? Come on, man. His run on the Hulk, his Star Trek novels like Imzadi, Q Squared, Vendetta. I mean, come on, man. He's going to be on my show, Masters of the Genre, on Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Central. It would be a big help if you could send me 10 or so questions I can ask him that would be specific to his career. Of course, I would also like to have you on Masters of the Genre. If there's a Monday you can eke out in your schedule at some point, but it's not urgent. I normally would have time to research and come up with my own questions, but I just emailed him and he was like, I'm free this Monday, so I set it up. Could you please send me some questions and ask him or point me toward Peter David resources? Well, thanks, man. You're a lifesaver. First of all, here's what I would say. 1, come on, man. I get paid for that shit. I'm a consultant. I was a Star Trek consultant, too. But second of all, I'll tell you. So not only did Peter David write some great Star Trek novels, he wrote an entire original series called Star Trek New Frontiers, which ran, I want to say, 15 books. He created Mackenzie Calhoun, and they should have adapted that. I mean, check out that series. Look into his Marvel Comics runs, which are great, specifically his run on the Hulk. That's where I would begin, and it'll ping pong you off into different directions. But check it out, Gil. And yeah, I'll come on your show if I have a Monday free. So that's pretty great. And then S-Beam wants to come on fully articulated, which I will have him on. Now let's see what you guys have to say, because I know I keep seeing it popping up. Man, do a lot of people want to talk about He-Man. I can't wait. Now, by the way, do I have to duck? I just want to know, should I am I going to have to duck through because are you guys going to take me out? And, deservedly so, maybe. I have no problem with if that's where I'm going. Boy, I can't wait to delve into this. Do I need, actually, Willow, you know what, the one thing, Willow always sends in a tip at the beginning of the show. God love her. Willow Yang. And whenever Willow sends in a tip, I feel all is right with the world, because I feel that she has my best interests at heart. We certainly have her best interests at heart. I mean, Willow Yang is the girlfriend you've always wanted. That's how I see her. And she's so smart, and she knows so much about, I mean, I love listening to her. I love reading her reviews about Star Trek. I mean, my God. Anyway, so she started, and I'm going to begin with Willow Yang. Willow says, do you watch the Olympics? I do watch the Olympics. I've watched none of the Olympics. What is your favorite summer Olympic sport? Personally, I think it's long past time that they had a men's division for synchronized swimming. Well, Willow, who am I to say no to that? I was always a decathlon guy. I love track and field. I love track and field events, and because I used to run track. I ran the mile and hurdles when I was in junior high school. Man, that was fucking brutal, let me tell you. So I do like track and field. That's probably my favorite summertime sports. But I haven't watched it yet. I want to catch up. I haven't seen any of the Olympics. That's not true. I saw a little bit today. Austin Hernandez sends in a super chat and says, "Sup, Rob?" Well, Austin, sup to you, brah. How are things? How you holding up? Sheriff Carl in the PNW says, one of my earliest memories was going to the Kingdome for a Seahawks game to watch Skeletor fight He-Man at halftime. Well, that was the live-action He-Man show. We delved into that in the documentary. My dad managed a warehouse that had a deal with Mattel. I had a shitload of He-Man growing up, thanks to merch falling off the truck. I'll bet you did. I still, believe it or not, I still want to get that new Wind Rider that they came out with. That thing is badass. I want to have that in my Robservatory. And by the way, that new Castle Grayskull they made's dope too. And, you know, I do have a connection to the toys as figures, but not as a TV show. Louis Terrazas. I mean, I think Louis Terrazas has one of the coolest names. I just love it. I'm probably mispronouncing it. Terrazas. I just love it. I love it. I love seeing it. I love his picture. I love everything about Louis Terrazas. Rob, you made me even more hyped for Dune. I think the... wait a minute. You know what? I've screwed up. You can't even read these. I had this all right, and now it's all screwed up. So there you go. Now you can see it. Now I can read it. Louis Terrazas says, you made me get even... Oh, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. There we go. Where was I? You made me even more hyped for Dune. I think the modern generation can't get into something so highbrow, but for me, the themes are metal as fuck. Well, Louis, you're right. And I would say to everybody, I think the modern generation can. Here's the thing. With our OnlyFans, Instagram youth, Pornhub watching people that are virgins till 28, I would say this. I think people are starved for intelligent entertainment that is engaging. I could tell from the movie that we're going to get something that way. People will puzzle over it. People might even pick up a book. I think people are going to dig Dune. I hope so. You know, because that would be great. Matt Guillemette. So I saw Fast 9. It was the worst one, but I enjoyed it. It was a family drama comedy film. I know you didn't like it, but Han is back with his family from Fast 3, and you will see him in more films. Look, but it was so... That movie, I hated it so much. I love the Fast and the Furious movies, but it was a cartoon. They turned it into a comedy cartoon. You're right. I just couldn't take it. Midnight's Edge After Dark. Tom said, I meant Fantastic Planet last night, not Forbidden Planet. You the man. For those of you who've never seen René Laloux's Fantastic Planet, it's one of my favorite science fiction films. It is a Czechoslovakian-French co-production that was made in 1973. It won a special jury prize at the Cannes Film Festival. It is one of the greatest science fiction animated films ever. You should watch it. Criterion put it out on Blu-ray. But I would say this, and I don't normally say this, watch the American dub. Maybe that's just me, but I love the American dub. Barry Bostwick plays the main character. I met him at a convention once, and I walked up to him, and I go, I got to tell you, you're in one of my favorite movies. And he goes, oh, Rocky Horror. I was like, no. Megaforce? No. You did the voice for Fantastic Planet. And he told me I was the first person to ever come up to him to talk to him about Fantastic Planet. We talked for like an hour. What a guy. So you're right, Tom. Hell yeah. Darth Plato, the official philosopher, the official historian, actually, of the Burnettwork. Darth Plato says, my prediction is that Kevin Smith will make Tila trans somehow and take the mantle of He-Man. I suspect the Sword of Power will be destroyed as an iconoclastic angle, like taking away Grayskull and displacing its power. Smith thinks he's fixing it. Oh, man, I don't know, man. Because remember, you're still dealing with a franchise property. I mean, they want to sell He-Man toys. They want the Sword of Power. They want Grayskull. I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to restore the iconographic or the iconic nature of these characters. I think. The Jughead sends in a super chat. Thank you, Jughead. Hi, Rob, Joshua, and the rest of the Robservations family. We have the same taste in animation. Johnny Quest, animated Star Trek, Alex Toth, cartoons. Ooh, heaven. Laugh out loud. Love and respect from the UK, bro. Right back at you, man. I'm wearing my Akira shirt. I like that. You know, I love animation, but look, I'm a Miyazaki fan. Princess Mononoke. I mean, I had seen actually Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, My Neighbor Totoro. I'm a fan of animation, but, you know, I like animation that has something more going on. And the He-Man animated series for me was just, it was after my time. Lucas Bachman sends in a super chat and says, I haven't seen it, but Netflix made a huge mistake by trying to claim their miniseries was better and going to be more widely accepted than a billion-dollar franchise was in 1985. Well, you know, when you spend money making something, what else are you supposed to say? You're not going to like this. We're making it, but it kind of sucks. I mean, it seems like the people that were involved making it were really thought about it. I mean, look, I got more from that article I read today in terms of what the creators were thinking, where they were coming from, and I agreed with a lot of what they were saying than I've ever read about anything about modern Star Trek. So that you might not like where it's gone, but at least the creators have their head in the right place. Their head's in the game. They're not people that, especially the executives at Netflix, they're the ones that brought it to Smith. So Chris C. said, Smith made it worse by going after clownfish and lying to everyone. If he didn't instigate, it wouldn't be as bad as it is. He owes them an apology. Now, I have to say, to be honest, I'm not really sure what... Like, Kevin Smith is as much a YouTuber or as an online pundit as the rest of us. I try and make it a point to not go after my fellow YouTubers. And by the way, I like Clownfish TV. They're one of the channels that I zip around and watch. I think that sucks when people go after fellow YouTubers and fellow online pundits. I think, what's funny is I even watch people that I'm not big fans of, that I'm not a huge fan of, just because I like to hear what their point of view is. I would never go after a fellow YouTuber because everyone's out there. If you're going to go on and you're going to start a YouTube channel and you're saying your mind, you're speaking your piece, you're telling people who and what you are, that takes some goddamn courage. And while if I'm going to have a beef with a YouTuber about a point of view, I'm happy to debate that. We can have an erudite, respectful conversation. But to go after fellow YouTubers for not liking something or having an opinion, that's fucked up, man. And now I haven't seen what Kevin Smith said. Full disclosure, I used to write for his website, Movie Poop Shoot. I've always liked Kevin Smith. The interactions I've had with him, they have not been extensive, but they've always been good. I do object to that. I mean, one of the things that I don't ever want to do on this channel is go after my fellow YouTubers that exist in this space. And I genuinely like people, as you all know. And there's a lot of people that come after me like, Rob, why do you stream with this person I don't like or that person I don't like? Well, how about the fact that, first of all, we're all fans. All the people that exist in this YouTube space that speak out, we all are bonded by the same thing. And you know what that is? We want good shit. We want good shit. We want cool shit. We want stuff to be good. We don't want it to suck. My particular suck fest is Star Trek. And some people like it. And, modern Star Wars. We got The Mandalorian now, which is sort of, that's fine. Book of Boba Fett, can't wait. Ahsoka, all that. I'm really into that. And I look, the Star Wars, I mean, everyone hates The Last Jedi. I hated Force Awakens. Last Jedi was like, I don't have a problem. But to me, the Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker are horrible vandalism against the Star Wars franchise. At least with Last Jedi, you could maybe make a case that we could have had a better, you tear Luke down to have a good redemption. I don't think that he had a good redemption at the end of Last Jedi, but it's kind of cool. Anyway, so I think, Chris C., you are correct. Kevin Smith should not go after, you don't go after critics. Here's the thing. I learned this a long time ago. When you make something, you have to allow it to exist on its own. It must be allowed to exist. It's your work. Don't go after critics and say, you don't know what you want. The worst thing a creator can do, the worst thing, is to jump in the fray and try and defend your work. The work should speak for itself. If you have to go out and defend your work to people, you have lost. There's a piece of advice. I'll give you an example. So, and I'm not going after them, but I just want to point this out. There was a comment left on the Tango Shalom. Oh, hang on.
Everyone.
Oops. Left on the Tango Shalom trailer. And I pinned it. But here is the comment. The comment is, and this was published 10 hours ago. I mean, the Tango Shalom trailer has been online. I just put one on my page today. Here's the comment I got. Now, keep in mind, I've worked on this movie for 5 years. And the fact that we are getting a theatrical release is a huge deal. So, regardless, but this person writes in, Rob, this looks terrible. Your fan base are just trying to be nice to you and lie, saying it looks great. It doesn't. It looks like a studio exec watched Fiddler on the Roof, an actual quality movie, but didn't understand what made it work and decided to make a cheap, straight-to-Redbox ripoff shot over the weekend. I am sorry for all the cast and crew involved. with this mess. That's what somebody wrote on the trailer on my page today. So this is the internet. Do I care? No. Because this comment tells me more about, for one, they haven't even seen the movie. They're watching a trailer. Rob, this looks terrible. Fair enough. You want to think it looks terrible, it's great. But it's so interesting. I'm sorry for all the cast and crew involved with this mess. The reason I don't care about stuff like this, and the real reason why, by the way, I did respond. And my response, whenever somebody criticizes my work, I kind of always say the same thing. And this is what I always say. I always channel Johnny Depp from Ed Wood. Well, my next one will be better. That's all I say. So I wrote, my next one will be better. And then I wrote, appreciate the honesty. Hopefully, if you ever see the finished film, it might change your mind. And then he wrote back, like most trailers, it showed most of the plot. This is just a poorly made movie. Why would I want to watch Tomcats again? Once was enough. And the funny thing is the trailer, one, it doesn't show a lot of the plot. And two, I had an experience where a woman came after me earlier this year because she saw the trailer and she was an Orthodox Jew and was offended by it. And I said to her, you know what? Why don't you watch the movie? And I sent her a link and she watched the film and she wrote back to me. She goes, I can't believe this. Your trailer doesn't do your film justice. And I'm like, well, it's a trailer. It's a marketing thing. It's a trifle. It's supposed to make you laugh. And she wrote back about how much the movie meant to her. And so my worldview is that let the work speak for itself. If people want to criticize it, great. If they really want to criticize the work. But this person, like most trailers, it showed most of the plot. How do you know, if you haven't seen the movie, by your own admission, Rob, this looks terrible, like most trailers, it showed most of the plot. This is just a poorly made movie. Is it? How do you know? I would say for a low-budget movie, for what it costs, I'm really proud of it. I don't think it's a poorly made movie at all. How would you say it's a poorly made movie? I mean, if I want to watch Tomcats once enough, that's fine. I get that all the time. Free Enterprise sucks. Everything you've done sucks. Fine. You know, you just got to roll with it. Got to roll with it. So, yeah. You just got to go with it. Mexican Iron Man, my man Mike sends in a super chat and says, happy Saturday, R&B. Your 4K trailer looks great. Hail the great chat stream, peeps and wrenches. Long live True Trek. See, this is why I love the community that we have on YouTube. You know, there's always people that are telling me that I shouldn't stream with this person or I shouldn't stream with that person. I have to tell you, my experience about people on YouTube, I've been accepted with nothing but open arms. No one since I've been doing this YouTube channel has been mean to me. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. And I feel that I have, like, if I had a problem, like I did actually when my cat's tail almost had to be amputated, I felt terrible. And I was early on, and I shouldn't have done it, but I was like, oh my God, I felt terrible. And people rallied. I mean, I didn't have any cash on hand, and we had to spend like $1,500 to get Skippy's tail fixed. And you know, Elizabeth and I, she's going to school or working. I mean, we're not rich. And at the time, we were just between checks and money and all that. And people rallied, and I got enough money from people to fix our cat. And that was a big deal. It saved her tail. Like, it was really hit and miss, like whether that tail was going to be amputated or not. And if it had gotten amputated, I would have been riddled with guilt. So I've had not a bad experience from the people I've streamed with or the entire YouTube community. And yet, people I don't know, Rob, this looks terrible. Okay, fine. It's getting theatrically released, and we might have a premiere at Lincoln Center, but you do you. Benzins sends in a super chat and says, Rob, I really enjoyed Masters of the Universe. Note the title of the show, haters. I think it's clear what will happen in part 2, and I can't wait to see it. Yeah. I mean, it's been interesting to see the whole, and having no dog in this hunt, I've been interested to see it. So yeah, I'm glad you dug it, Benson's. Lucas Bachman sends in a super chat. Thank you, Lucas, for promoting or supporting the channel in that way. On Outrage. Doomcock ranted about Grayskull transforming into the Hall of Wisdom. I alerted him this was the 1983 Writer's Guide story. I think he was surprised. being burned from other franchises had made Rage, or has made Rage reflexive. Lucas, I think you're absolutely right. I think Fandom's go-to position now is Rage. And by the way, my go-to position when it comes to Star Trek is unbridled rage, as Mahler would say in one of his great reviews, an unbridled rage. I feel that way I felt that way Star Trek, an unbridled rage. I would never steal Mahler's thunder because I've loved his videos, but my God, talk about unbridled rage. But I do think that Fandom is too quick to pull the trigger on the rage machine. I do. I think especially, what I've read about Masters of the Universe, to me, from somebody that doesn't love He-Man, but just hearing the story, I'm like, that sounds really interesting to me. Whereas you tell me the story of the rise, of Force Awakens, I'm like, that's a bad story. The first question I would ask is, where did the First Order come from? Don't tell me to read an aftermath book. I did. But in the context of that film, if you're a kid watching all the Star Wars movies, you should be ashamed that The Force Awakens follows Return of the Jedi. Because any kid, if I was 6, I'd be like, what is this bullshit? We watched them topple the Empire, and then the next movie there's just a faux Empire? What? There's a new faux Darth Vader cover band out there? What? Terrible. Jeff Yerke and Mrs. Yerke. Hi, Rob. Going back to Record Store Day. Scores include Miles Davis, War, the box set, Donna Summer, Bill Evans, the Ramones, and more. First song played, War, Low Rider. Live long and prosper, the Yerk Man. Well, I'm glad you're out and about with Mrs. Y. Like, do you guys like disco? Do you put on, the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack and listen to Night Fever, and then you know what happens. You do a little disco, do a little dance, make a little love, get down tonight. You know that Casey and the Sunshine Band? I'm going to imagine that you guys put on the vinyl and boom, chicka, boom, bow. It happens even with your bad back. Matt Gillimet sends in another super chat. Which is better, The Rise of Skywalker or F9? Ooh. I'm going to say F9. Because at least F9 didn't have hyperspace skipping, which makes no sense. You don't come out of hyperspace into the middle of a fucking city. You know what happens when you do that? You don't, because you'd be destroyed. Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. You cannot emerge from planetary in a gravity well out of hyperspace. Please, people, understand this. Why is it so hard for J.J. Abrams and his ilk to understand things like, light speed? Please make it believable. Listen, we're on a planet, and we're going to beam onto a starship traveling at warp. We have no... How do you set a coordinate? When you're moving, you can't set a coordinate on something that's moving that fast. You don't even know where it is. I mean, give me a break. But no, we're going to beam into the water pipes. God, I fucking hate that movie. Electron star collapse. Don't let the stars collapse on you. I'm slowly getting through Masters of the Universe. I don't hate it yet. But there are some fundamental writing problems, especially the character personalities don't feel like an evolution of their legacy. Now, that's a comment I can get behind. I'd be like, okay, I'm down. I buy that. I can see, okay. That to me is a valid criticism. At least it seems like one. Thomas Gilkey sends in a super chat and says, I think a few fans are more mad about how Kevin Smith ruined He-Man. It's kind of like Rian Johnson ruining Luke in The Last Jedi. Much love, sir. But here, Thomas, knowing that this is the first of 2 parts, maybe more, is this not like a cliffhanger to me, like I think, remember, they want to restore the luster of He-Man. They're a toy company first and foremost. They want to sell toys. I think I would wait. I would wait. Okay, and see what happens, Thomas. Mike Coonrad sends in a super chat. Okay, this is the great shame. Everyone knows I love Moon Knight. I mean, there's always Moon Knight here in my Robservatory, never far away. Now, for those of you who know anything about Moon Knight, I got to put this down. I don't want this to fall and break. There's a new Moon Knight series that was released this week. A new Moon Knight comic series that I did not go out and get. I did not, because normally I don't buy flippers. I don't buy individual issues anymore. I did buy some omnibuses this week from cheap graphic novels, but I did not get the new Moon Knight. Mike Coonrad says, thoughts on the new Moon Knight book? From one massive Moon Knight fan to another, I really dug it. Some cool variant covers to snag as well. I don't collect individual issues anymore. You know, I only collect my omnibuses and hardcovers, and there are so many good ones. Between the reprints of Swamp Thing, well, yes, the recoloring fucking kicks ass. So stop that. But if you say it's good, you know what? I feel like it might have sold out everywhere. I do want to go and get. It's funny because, let's see, where was it? Oh, you know, I've been looking for comics. I've been going through my comic books to slab. You know, I think you guys know that I've been doing that. And it's funny because I pulled out, like, this is my reading copy, but Fist of Khonshu, this #1, and I never liked this Moon Knight series, and I never liked it. But anyway, it's here. I was looking at it. I'll probably get, not this one slab, but my mint condition one slabbed. And, yeah. So, I mean, yep, this is all falling over. I really need to get this whole place. I got to get this whole place done. I want to read it. I haven't read it, but I'll probably just wait to get the hardcover, unless it's really great. But if you say it's good. The Jughead sends in a super chat and says, "Hi, Rob. It's me again. I agree with you regarding new Star Trek. To me, anything after Enterprise I disregard. I've given the new movies and Discovery a chance. You can keep it. Keep up the great work." You know what I really don't like? Like, one of the great things about Star Trek was, it was, my interest in Star Trek was perpetuated by the, let's call it the extended universe. The books that were released. Somebody mentioned the Star Trek Space Flight Chronology earlier that came out with the motion picture. And like the Akutas, the Space Flight Chronology, or the chronology, the timeline chronology, their encyclopedia of Star Trek, and modern Star Trek, all of modern Star Trek, the Kelvinverse and modern Star Trek, none of it fits. So all of this reference material that I have over there, I'm looking at 4 shelves of it. All this stuff I had of Star Trek my whole life, none of it. The new Star Trek doesn't fit into it at all. The evolution of the ships, the evolution of the uniforms, they didn't even try. And that's one of the things I can't stand, because in my mind, Star Trek has this great history, like the Gundam Universal Century. They just said, fuck it. Who cares? You know, this isn't our Star Trek. Let's have our blue disco uniforms or whatever, or gray. It's just terrible. And part of my Star Trek fandom was all wrapped up in all of those books over there, where you could make sense, for the most part, of the Star Trek fictional universe. And then they're just like, fuck it, they don't care. Because none of those people care. They didn't look at any of those books. They don't even understand that that was an aspect of Star Trek fandom that's a part of it. I mean, you know what? Playmobil is not making a $500 Star Trek Discovery. They're making a $500 original series Enterprise. Just saying. So thank you, Jughead. Team Worm! With this Masters of the Universe revival, Kevin Smith, Ted Biaselli, and Rob David didn't bother to meet or satisfy expectations before rushing off to subvert them. Now, Team Worm, that's also a valid criticism, but please provide me an example of that. Help me understand, because I don't quite yet. Chris C. says, you don't need to watch He-Man. Just watch the Critical Drinker's review. Saves a lot of time. Ooh, did the Critical Drinker review He-Man? Obviously he did, because you're saying, I love Critical Drinker. Love him. And I think that, the Critical Drinker review, the Critical Drinker does have some biases, but he's a very, if you want to understand story structure and storytelling, even if you disagree with Critical Drinker, I always tell people to watch his reviews. His reviews are always worth watching. They are smart. They're well considered. He is a storyteller. He's a novelist himself. And I think watching, and I've streamed with him and haven't agreed, like we part ways on Creed. But I'll tell you something, he's not wrong about his opinions on Creed. So, wow, I didn't know that. I'm going to watch that. Brian Sutter says, hey, Rob, not sure about your take on He-Man, but it always comes back to Star Trek Discovery being pee-pee, poo-poo. Cheers. Yeah, well, look, I only go back to Star Trek because it's a franchise I like. And so, people who love He-Man, I don't have an understanding of that love, but I go back, I try and equate it to the love I have of a franchise. So that's why I'm always going back to Star Trek, because that's the franchise I love the most, that I have the most attraction to. Speaking of people who I have an attraction to, you gotta love her. She sends in a super chat, a diamond super chat sticker. Thank you. Chris C says, what we are seeing is the culmination of the past few years of agenda-driven storytelling. Comic books, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, now He-Man. People are sick of it. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. Because I'm seeing, there's a lot, I agree. Star Trek, Star Wars, and Doctor Who are franchises that have been severely compromised. I see that might happen to Lord of the Rings and all these other things. But with He-Man, I'd be curious to see where the story goes. I know they've done setup and payoff. I'd be curious. But I think you're right. People are sick of it. Because what's happening is, again, what they're doing is they're taking these franchises and they're not being true to the franchises. They are changing what they fundamentally are to fit today's modern age. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can do both. You can have great storytelling, but you must honor the franchise that you're working in. Don't go back. Don't take it upon yourself and change Doctor Who's origin. Don't go back and say, hey, we can do... No. You know what? Creators should be like, it's better that no one knew where William Hartnell came from. It's better that no one knows where the Doctor comes from. Because you can add to the mythology all you want, but don't go change the foundational mythology. That's not for you to decide. You can't do that. I think that, and creators should know, and the BBC should be like, you know what? It's better people don't know the origin of Doctor Who. And if you're going to tell that origin now, you're not being respectful to the rest of the creators. The whole point about Doctor Who, part of the fun of that character was the mystery. You didn't know where Doctor Who came from or exactly. You allude to it, you can add to it, but don't go back and say, hey, you know what? Guess what Doctor Who really is? And then make it some, agenda-driven story point, because that just seems like you're pandering, and it's so lame. And it's lame. Man, I got my moderators sending me super chats. It's amazing. Louise X Sparrow. There's no difference between Star Trek and He-Man when it comes to people's love for something. He-Man is better than you remember. Well, Louise, I will take your word for it. I trust you. You're a very learned individual. I don't remember it at all because I didn't watch it during the time. I bought the figures first. I never watched the show, and I worked on the documentary back in 2012. So that's when I watched episodes. So I have no connection to it as a fan, other than I like the figures. Lucas Bachman, this is interesting. Lucas Bachman says, I love Masters of the Universe because it was my introduction to Lovecraftian horror. And really, also my introduction to reading. That's interesting. That to me is good. And this is why franchises, you can't poo-poo a franchise because, like you just said, look what it led you to. Star Trek and Star Wars. I started listening to my mom's Beethoven records because after Star Wars and I buying that soundtrack, I wanted to hear more music. I didn't know what classical music was. Until Star Wars came out, I had my Peter and the Wolf record, dun 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 dun. That's terrible. That's terrible, Peter and the Wolf. But you know what I mean? I love Peter and the Wolf. I had this record. I listened to both sides of it. It was great. It was like Aladdin and Peter and the Wolf, and it had this great music. And then Star Wars came out, and I wanted more classical music, and I realized these records that were in my house for 10 years that I never touched, which were downstairs by the phone in the family room where I watched the TV, my mom had all of Beethoven's symphonies. And I recognized that name. I knew dun-dun-dun-dun, but it wasn't until I fucking put on Beethoven's 7th Symphony. And I'm like, I recognize this music. I recognize Beethoven's 7th Symphony. They used it in Zardoz, even though I hadn't seen Zardoz yet, but I could have been thinking that if I was a time traveler, but So yes, these franchises are frequently gateway drugs to other forms of great art. So, love that. Stub McShave says, Hannah Arendt, philosopher, storytelling reveals meaning without commenting. Or wait, Hannah Arendt, a philosopher, says storytelling reveals meaning without committing an error of defining it. Oh, man, I love that. Can I tweet that shit out, Stubble? That is one great quote. Thank you for that one. Deary says, Grace Randolph even pointed out several execution flaws. We don't have an issue with Tila, but no strong male presence for a male-centric show. That's valid. But here's what I would say is, forget the difference. I mean, I understand. Is the story that is told with Tila as a protagonist, is it a good story? Here's what I haven't heard. I haven't heard people object to Tila and He-Man and this, but what I'm curious about is the story that's being told about the Eternia being stripped of magic and all that. Forget what you think about male and female gender roles and all that. Is the story good? And I keep hearing people say, I've heard more people say, even in this chat, the story's good. They like the story. I mean, Jer in Finland goes, this honors the 30 years of, it is called Masters of the Universe, so it's not called He-Man and Masters of the Universe. That's what I'm curious about. I have to go back and watch Grace Randolph. Snake Eyes sends in a super chat and says, although I had all the toys, I never liked the old show. I really love the 2002 series from which Smith took the idea of Teenage Adam, by the way. Ask Andre. Oh, see, that's a thing. I mean, to see that somebody who delved into the mythology that way, I think that's pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, I want to know. I don't know. Sheriff Carl says, I loved Masters of the Universe as a kid. As far as I was concerned, I was He-Man with my blonde bowl cut and plastic sword of power. But it's not easy to rewatch as an almost 38-year-old dude. I'm 2 episodes in on the new one, and it's fucking watchable and good so far. See, Sheriff Carl, that to me is the key. I never thought what I saw, even when I was going back and revisiting the show in 2012, I never thought it was good. I'm like, I understand why you like it. I just didn't think it was good. So if you're liking it now, that's what I'm interested in. Take away your thoughts about He-Man and gender and all that. Is the story they're telling good? Like the Dark Crystal series, the new Dark Crystal series, I was never a big fan of the original Dark Crystal. I thought it was kind of a liturgious dirge of a show or movie. I appreciated the craft. I could never get into it because of the puppets and all that. I thought I respected it, and I've owned it on many different formats. It's not something I go back and watch a lot. I did watch it before the series. I thought the series was great. I thought it was great. It was really, really good. And to me, it was all about the story. So, DJ Taterskins, TK144. Shouldn't that be TK421? Why aren't you at your post? Rob, what are your thoughts on Star Trek Picard? I thought it was genius. And Q in Season 2, yes. Can't get into Discovery at all. I wrote a spec ages ago. Wasn't ever picked up, but I accomplished it. Good for you, DJ Taterskins. I hate Star Trek Picard with every fiber of my existence. I know a lot of people who liked it. I thought the character of Jean-Luc Picard was completely out of character. It was very un-Star Trek. I thought the whole show was un-Star Trek, and I hated it. But I know people who did like it. And, bringing Q in, wow, and there's going to be a time anomaly, and they've got to go back in time and fix something. So, somebody watched All Good Things. Hey, what if we brought Q back, and he's got a problem, and we're going to have to set the timeline right and all that? What an original story. Well done, Star Trek. So anyway, but I don't begrudge that you like it. A lot of people do. It's cool that you wrote a script. I appreciate that. But yeah, I thought that Star Trek was bad Star Trek. I thought it was bad science fiction and bad television. And horribly written. And Michael Chabon, whose books I love. Why'd you do this? Why'd you got to play me this way? Frederico Della Casa, or is it Della Casa? Frederico Della Casa sends in a super chat and says, 1. Huge Master of the Universe fan. The lore in the 2002 series and DC Comics was fantastic, but this, for me, was another attack on masculinity archetypes than it was a new spin. That's valid. But I'd want to know why. I mean, Getting rid of for me, I don't even know, but the Skeletor He-Man thing at the beginning and them going away, and then obviously they're gonna have their luster restored, kind of interests me. But yeah, I don't know. Max sends in a tip. Max says, Rob, first time comment. Thanks for supporting the channel, Max. Is your last name Rockatansky? Max, are you mad? Max, first time comment, but I wanted to say I pulled the trigger on my first hot toy, the new Boba Fett. I'll probably end up getting Mando with Grogu as well. Just bummed it's such a long wait. I know. Dude, I know. I mean, I don't think that Boba Fett with the throne comes out till 2023. But there's something inherently optimistic about ordering hot toys these days because it takes 2 years to get them. So you're still assuming humanity will be here in 2 years, which I think that's one of the things I love about hot toys. I'm like, wow, it takes so long. Even when they're supposed to come out, I still have yet to get my Endgame Captain America. It came out in February. I'm still waiting for mine. I hope it's not canceled. But anyway, yes. The Jughead sends in another super chat. Hi, Rob. You must be sick of me by now. No, Jughead, you're supporting the channel, and thank you very much. Laugh out loud. Filmation had a better series than He-Man. The Great Tarzan 1976 series, The Space Sentinels, and, of course, Star Trek the Animated Series. Respect, bro. I got to tell you, I loved that Tarzan series in the 70s. Loved it. That was one of my favorite animated shows. I can see the opening titles and the thing. I love that show. I never saw Space Sentinels, and I love the animated series. But, man, you are correct. And didn't Filmation do the Flash Gordon series, too? That Flash Gordon series is great. 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 Oh, Federico de la Casa, this is one of two. Hang on. Let me go back to number one. Let me go back to Federico. He says, huge Masters of the Universe fan. The lore in the 2002 series and the DC Comics was fantastic, but this, for me, was another attack on masculinity archetypes rather than a new spin with another dystopic, apocalyptic approach. Killing He-Man was like killing Utopia, like killing Shazam, and Star Trek was the last utopian show in the air, except lately it wasn't. Interesting. That's a great take and not invalid. I completely see where you're coming from there. Everything's dystopia, which I don't understand. The Richard is here. The Richard writes in, aloha, Rob. As a Masters of the Universe Superman, if you don't know, the Richard is of course, one of our great moderators. He's been a long-time cornerstone here at the Burnettwork, and he also has great Masters of the Universe artwork that he's painted. Aloha, Rob. As a Masters of the Universe superfan, I already knew the story was headed this way. I loved it. Wow, I don't think I know a bigger Masters of the Universe fan than the Richard. He says he loves it. It's not perfect, and many of the complaints are understandable, though it satisfied my cravings and art. Forget the drama. Enjoy the art and adventure. See, I find it interesting that a lot of the big He-Man fans are digging the show. You know, and a lot of online punditry are talking about the gender flipping and the fact that Tila and her friends and Evil Lynn or whatever become these main characters. And, you know, and you get Sarah Michelle Gellar to play Tila, Buffy herself, one of the great strong female characters on genre television. Why not? So thanks for that, Richard. Canada Dry says, would you go back on Friday Night Tights? Hell yeah, I love those guys. Why wouldn't I? I like watching Gary. You know, here's what's so funny to me. What I don't understand. I don't have to agree with what Jeremy or even Az or Nerdrotic say or was it Just a Gundam? I'm a Gundam. I don't have to agree with what they say. I can still go on the show. I had a good time when I went on there last time. And there are people that are coming after me going, how dare you be friends with them? I'm like, why wouldn't I be? We're all fans. You know, we don't have to be the same way. We can talk. I mean, like, Az is I love streaming with Az. He says things I probably wouldn't say. I probably say things he wouldn't say. But I really like him. He is a smart man. He's fun to be around. He has a joie de vivre about life, and we share the same. We like the same things. Why would I not want to be friends with him? That's the funny thing. We might object or we might be different. We might be different in some ways, but I'm not my brother's keeper, and I'm not responsible for everything he does or says, but I like him. I like him as a human being, and I like Gary, and we're friends, and I like most of the people that I stream with or coexist with. There are very few people that I dislike. Most of the people that I've disliked is because they've actively said, they've either called me a garbage person. I'm like, you don't even know me. People I work with said that. It's really interesting that the actual people that I probably dislike, and the only reason there's some people that I think they would be shocked if they knew how much I liked them. And then when they said they made disparaging comments about me, I was like, huh, wow. I've always liked this person. And by the way, I still like, there's one person in particular, I'm not going to say this person's name, but there's one person in particular I have great fondness for, who literally called me a garbage person on Twitter. And I'm like, okay, well, anyway, what can you say? Jorge Jimenez says, awesome Akira shirt, Rob. Well, I love this shirt. Thank you for that. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Jorge. My man Kaz Graphics, the official cheesemonger of the Burnettwork, sends in a super chat. Thank you, Kaz. By the way, Kaz, he's one of the people that I met through this channel that we've never actually spoken. I am probably going to Seattle in August, and one of the things I most want to do is sit down with Kaz Graphics and buy him some drinks. I imagine he has a voice like Barry White, or something like that. I want him to wear his beret. I want to see his artwork. I just want to go down like I don't even know, go down to Belltown, have a few drinks with Kaz. Thank you, Kaz. I appreciate that. By the way, I just want to point out my favorite glass. It's a little funky, even though I washed it this morning. VN Graphics. I've said this before. I don't know why I love this glass so much, because it's like a beer can. I don't even like beer in cans. I like it in bottles. I love this glass. Love it. And I'm drinking way too much Zevia. Thank you, John Campia. I actually told Elizabeth, I called her, I'm like, you're not going to believe this, but I think I like Cola Zevia better than Diet Coke. Who would have thought? I don't know. Wait a minute, what happened? Oh God, this is a tough one. Sion Arcale? Sion, what a great name. I'm beginning to just become tired with a lot of the remakes. Everything needs to be dark subversion. Just give me something new instead of lazy. Amen. Like, what are they going to do in 20 years? What are they going to remake? Where are the new IPs? I mean, hopefully, look, Dune is not new, but hopefully Dune never really caught on. This could make Dune catch on. Dune could be a great new IP. I hope it is. Long live the fighters. I hope it is. But I agree with you. Where are the new IPs? There's so many great IPs out there, and it's like, where are they? I don't know. Where are we going to be in 20 years? What are you going to remake? Electron Star Collapse comes back and says, one real positive thing about the Masters of the Universe is that the backgrounds look like they could be reused for a 70s or 80s heavy metal album. Absolutely beautiful. Maybe that's what we should talk about tonight on Midnight Metal. We should talk about, what are your thoughts on the Masters of the Universe show? Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll keep this conversation rolling, because people are, man, I don't think the response to this show, and judging by even this show, I had no idea. I was like, to be honest, I was with the director of Tango Shalom, and I had to postpone the show. I had no idea. I was like, should I do a show about Masters of the Universe? Will anybody have enough to say? Like, I had some stuff to say from a fan perspective, but I was a little like, should I? I don't know. And apparently, wow, I can't believe the engagement here on this channel, this show. It's really great. But Electron Star Collapse, I agree with you. One of the things I'd never really worked. I did documentaries about animation, like on Fantasia and The Emperor's New Groove and Snow White. But I had never worked on animation until I worked on Dota Dragon's Blood and really started to see how it was developed from the beginnings to the end. And it was obvious to me that they really did a lot of great animation work in this He-Man show. So I agree. Julio Cesars says, shows used to feel like they were written by adults. The original series, most of TNG, Farscape, now everything feels like it's written by 8th graders. Julio, I completely agree. I cannot believe how dumb... Now, hang on. Let me back up and say things like The Queen's Gambit. I thought Scott Frank did a phenomenal job writing Godless and The Queen's Gambit. But yeah, a lot of our shows... and I feel that The Expanse is pretty well written because it's based on books. But my God, the people writing Star Trek, and it's just really, and I worry like the sisterhood, the woman that's running that. I don't want to diss her until I've seen what she's done. But like coming from Crossing Jordan and a lot of female-centric procedurals like Medium, I'm sure someone looked at a spreadsheet. Oh, here's her credits. Yes, she should write a show called The Sisterhood. I'm like, it scares me they're calling it The Sisterhood. How about the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood or something else? The Sisterhood sounds like, I don't know, but it doesn't sound like, and they hired somebody that the jury's out, but that's what I feel we're going to get. And I'm tired of getting that kind of writing. I think you're right. At least the erudite shows that whether it's Star Trek should be written by adults. Great science fiction is written by adults. Because most people, if they're not grappling with those issues, they're going to write shit. Mr. Canadianer says, sends in a tip and says, my thoughts are that characters have to be present and not sidelined in order to have agency and make the big hero's setback have meaning. It felt as though many characters had their agency removed, which ruined the Empire moment. Ooh, that's interesting. Now, Mr. Canadian, that's a valid criticism. That's something I could be like, okay, having not seen the show, I can't speak to that, but that's something I can be like, I get what you're saying there. And that to me is exactly the kind of criticism that I want to hear. I mean, having characters with their agency removed, that's valid. That's a valid criticism. Yeah, I thought that's a great criticism. Lucas Bachman says the YouTube channel Spectre Creative, who was the Mattel brand manager for Mattel a few years ago, said he loved it. And the show used his toy line ideas. Interesting. Yeah. That again, that's good to hear. But again, you work for Mattel. But I like that. I mean, look, the fact that when people start really talking about this show, forget the initial gender swap, knee-jerk, mad reactions. When people start really getting into talking about what they did or didn't like about the show, I find that very interesting. And there's a lot of really valid criticism on both sides. I love that. John Suntress. Okay, John, if you guys don't listen to the Word Balloon podcast with John Suntress, you are missing out. He has incredible guests. His podcast, he's thoughtful, he's fun. He runs a rollicking conversation if you're ever lucky to talk to him or just listen to a show, which you should. He does a really good job. I've been on a number of times. I really like the Word Balloon podcast. He always has great guests, especially if you're a comic fan. So John Suntress says, yo, man, the Popcast guys. By the way, I love, if you guys don't watch the Popcast, go subscribe right now. If you don't subscribe to this channel, go subscribe to them. But if you don't subscribe to this channel, why not? Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification button. I don't usually do that for the channel. I just assume people are smart. If they like the shit, they'll sign up. But the Popcast guys are great, and so is the Word Balloon podcast. Go, my highest recommendation for both. The Popcast guys just released a balanced video editorial on YouTube about the Pike Show and the divide the show should repair for us old Trek folk frustrated by the new Star Trek stuff. Come back on the podcast in August so we can chat new stuff. Bruh, I'll always come on your podcast. Let's do it. In the meantime, everybody go to John Suntress's Word Balloon podcast. Subscribe, support, do whatever you can. He's a great man. Hassan Chavez sends in a 45-cent super chat. Hassan, love you, man. And by the way, you are one of the foundational members of the Post-Geek Singularity. It's great to still have you here. Thank you. Louis Bachman sends in a super chat. Rob, did any He-Man episode strike you as better than others? One comment He-Man versus other 80s cartoons is it was not the same villain every episode. The non-Skeletor ones did more universe building. Well, again, I haven't seen enough to comment, but yeah, I can't name you episodes because the only time I delved into them was once back in 2012. But yeah, I mean, I liked the characters, and my like of the characters came from buying the action figures. They kept adding to them, but I liked them, but I couldn't tell you. We got all these members stuff. Well, thank you all for being members, all these people. But I think these are the members renewing their membership this month. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Andy LDN sends in a nice super chat. Thank you for that. All super chats are nice, but thank you for that one. It's making new The Next Generation OG cast, and 30 minutes Picard is killed. A few years later, we pick up with Deanna, and she's still pissed he died, and somehow she completely missed he was Locutus of Borg and only found out after he died. She's then the center of the show as she's still pissed. She missed the obvious, and on top of that, she stops looking like Deanna and looks like Dave Bautista. I don't want to watch that show. That's pretty funny, Andy. Yeah. You know what? I wouldn't mind seeing a new Next Generation show that was like, I was kind of hoping that's might be what Picard is. We get a whole new cast of characters I don't care about. I mean, come on. I mean, for all of you people that want to be woke and all that, you give a woman of color, she lives in a trailer and she's a drug addict and a deadbeat mother. Come on. That's not what the Star Trek universe is all about. And then, of course, if you weren't woke enough, at the end, let's have her be in a lesbian relationship with 7 of 9. I mean, my God, really? Are your agenda checkboxes? Really? Do you have to... Give me a good story, man. Sheriff Carl says, dude, let's fucking party, dude. Yes. Dude, I want to go to Spud Fish and Chips at Alki. We'll take like a fifth of tequila and we'll get ripped and watch girls play volleyball. That's what I want to do. Aurora Uplinks sent in a super chat. Thank you, Aurora Uplinks. Keith O'Neill sends in a super chat and says, regarding original IP, Red Letter Media said it best. Say what you want about boomers. They aren't whining about the... Regarding original IP, Red Letter Media said it best. Say what you want about boomers. They aren't whining about the latest Howdy Doody reboot. Amen, Keith. Yeah, my glasses are fogging up on that one. Oh, boy. Just Plain Steve says, a lot of fans are trying to retroactively apply a Shakespearean level of depth to a goofy cartoon about a magic muscle man and his giant green tiger fighting against a mustache-twirling, skull-faced bad guy. I loved the original show, but high art it was not. Just Plain Steve, you, sir, speak the truth. And that's why that's what you have to look in context to the He-Man show. I mean, you do. And it wasn't high art. It was never high art. It was literally a commercial to sell toys. That's what it was. It didn't even have storytelling integrity when it first came out. It was designed to sell toys. And while people liked it, I understand people liked it. And I'm not going to poo-poo that, but yeah. You're right, Just Plain Steve. Stub McShave says maybe they will call it the maybe they'll call it the Benedetta Jesuit Sisterhood. Boom, chicka, boom, boom. Oh, that was a Paul Verhoeven joke to his lesbian nun movie, which, by the way, did not win awards at Cannes. What are they thinking? Come on, give Paul an award. He's in his 80s. He made a new lesbian nun movies from the 70s. You know, between that and lesbian vampire movies, a particular favorite of mine when I was a kid. I didn't quite understand what was going on. I just knew I loved it. So let's hear it for Paul Verhoeven and Benedetta. Ooh. Based on a true story. Benson sends in a super chat and says, Rob, as you know, I walked out of JJ's con Star Trek when they switched the death. How did you react when you first saw it? Dude, Gene Wilder, 91 today. That's amazing. Pure imagination, that is. I hated Star Trek Into Darkness. I can't even tell you how much I hated that movie. That movie is one of the most brain-dead, inane movies I've ever seen. It's easily one of the worst scripted, most horribly mounted. And look, it's beautifully made. Technically, it's fine. But my God, what a stupid, brain-dead movie. I wanted to walk out when the Enterprise is underwater so you could have a joke about a fish swimming by. I'm like, I don't like it. I hated it. It's terrible. I didn't walk out, though. I sat there. It made me angry. It still makes me angry. It makes me angry I own those movies. It really does. Especially Into Darkness. I hate that movie with every fiber of my being. The Squish Show, by the way, you should watch the Squish Show's movie. It's still on the Burnettwork. It was part of the film festival, which, by the way, we are going to give out the awards for when Elizabeth comes back, and we do Elizabeth. The Squish Show sends in a super chat and says, Masters of the Universe was disappointing. I will just go back and watch my classic episodes. In positive news, looks like we will be getting an awesome remake of The Green Knight. For those of you who don't know, there's a movie coming out, or will it come out, called The Green Knight. That is an Arthurian story, part of the Arthurian mythos. And the movie, the trailer looks great. Apparently, the director went in and recut the whole movie during COVID, and now its release has been pushed back. I don't know what's going on. That's pretty funny. I don't know. Yeah, I again, Masters of the Universe, it's not my thing, man. It's just not my thing. Sheriff Carl says, I'm in. I've got access to party favors as long as they're good, man. It's been a long time since I've had party favors, and I was a big fan of party favors, and then it was just bad. Here's the thing. Party favors are great, but only when they're good. You know what I'm saying? Team Worm sends in a super chat and says, a Picard show should be a West Wing type show with Admiral Picard as the chief of Starfleet, putting out galactic fires, Federation politics, etc. Fucking men. I think that would be really, really interesting. Or, you know, what if he was on an archaeological site? Like, didn't they make that movie with Ralph Fiennes? It was called The Dig or something. I mean, to turn him into, oh, my little Starfleet. First of all, they made Starfleet. Here's what I really hated about Picard. In order for the story to work, they had to turn Starfleet into this horrible, evil organization. That Earth was just bad, and Starfleet sucked. I mean, I'm like, you've lost me. You've already changed the Star Trek universe. Humanity is supposed to have gotten past this, and the whole idea of synthetics, like, give me a break. Give me a break. It was so brain dead. I hated it so much. I like your idea, Team Worm, though. Christian Reed sends in a super chat. Thank you, Christian. I hope I got your name right. A DJ Taterskins TK114 sends in a super chat and says, Rob, thanks for your thoughts on Picard. Though we differ, that's okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Love your show. New viewer overall. Love your keen mind. Question. Question. 1701 Classic, A, B, C, or D? Okay. My favorite fictional spaceship of all time is the USS Enterprise. However, loved it. I have a 1/350 scale version of it right there. I never thought I would say this, but in 1979, on December 7th, 1979, when I went in and saw the flyby, the Kirk and Scotty flying around the Enterprise in Star Trek The Motion Picture, the Enterprise as depicted with that pearlescent paint, the Star Trek The Motion Picture refit Enterprise is my favorite fictional starship of all time. It took what I loved already, my fetish object. I mean, I'm telling you, I have a sexual reaction when I see the Starship Enterprise. No, I don't want to put my dick inside the hangar deck. But, you know, you could if you wanted to, I suppose. I would never do that. But it's that kind of a reaction. I love the Enterprise. But the refit Enterprise from Star Trek The Motion Picture is my favorite fictional starship. And, gosh, I think one of the most egregious crimes that the J.J. Abrams Star Trek era has given us, starting in 2009, is there has not been one starship that was cool. The Discovery could have been cool if they stuck more, if they hewed closer to, or hewed, what's the word I want? If they had made it closer to the McQuarrie version from Planet of the Titans, which is where Brian Fuller was going. Why did they get rid of round nacelles? Why does Star Trek Discovery not look anything like any Star Trek ever? I don't like it. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind, oh my God. Brendan Mills sends in a super chat and says, I try not to hate the new shows and stuff, but I just can't help feeling like they're trying to shove farts down my tummy. I mean, usually when you have farts shoved down your tummy, it's a fetish. It's a thing you like. You know, you want your lady to do for you if that's what she wants. And if she's GGG, she will, right? I don't want farts shoved down my tummy. So, Brendan, I feel you. Sheriff Carl says, I don't fuck with bunk shit. My friends, Good Golly Miss Molly and Jack Frost are quality pals. Well, let me tell you, one of the things I've missed most in my life, I had the best MDMA LA could get you. And I missed that. I haven't done it in quite over 15 years, actually. And I kind of dealt it a little bit. But it was amazing. And by the way, it might be made legal. So I'm a big proponent of Good Golly Miss Molly as long as it's good and pure. And just for those of you, here's a little, we're talking about ecstasy. Here's a little pro tip for ecstasy. First of all, don't drink. It ruins it all. Remember, ecstasy is not like cocaine or any other drug. Ecstasy trips the serotonin that's already in your brain, and what it does is it makes all of the serotonin release. That's what it does. That's all it does. You can't have more of it, and it doesn't change. You can maybe do a pill and a half, maybe two if you want, to get the last vestiges. But do it once a month. That's it. Once a month. Don't drink. Enjoy it. It's the best thing ever. If you've never done it, big proponent. I haven't done it in a long time, but Sheriff Carl, I trust you. On that note, as I've now been a proponent of MDMA, which, by the way, could be legal in the United States. Again, it was legal until 1986, invented by a German pharmaceutical company in 1913. Just saying. That said, do I get demonetized for that? I don't know. I want to thank everybody who's come to this channel. Tonight, I will be on Midnight Metal. I hope I'm going to be with the great Dave Parker. Maybe the late night YouTube shows. Last night was fun. We didn't bring anybody else on, but it was still fun. I want to thank all of you for supporting this channel via Super Chats and tips. Today you guys were very generous. My God, who knew? Who knew that Masters of the Universe would be such a lightning rod for actually good conversation? So I want to thank you all for doing that, for being respectful and fun and nice and explaining. You know, I thought both sides very interesting. This is a really interesting debate. I don't think I've seen fan debates more interesting than this in a long time. I really like it. Now, it's fun because maybe I'm above the fray because I wasn't, I'm not, He-Man is not something that is a thing that I'm attached to as much as people are. And I kind of like being able to observe fandom this way. But I want to thank all of you, everybody, both pro and con. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and being respectful and nice about it. Like, I think everybody was able to state their case, and I love that. And the thing that I love the most about this channel is you, the audience. And we have these kinds of debates. No one's like, fuck you, dude. I mean, it was very nice. And I want to thank you all for doing that. And people clearly stated their position. And this is why this is the best audience on YouTube. Part of the reason I do this show and what keeps me coming back every day when I'm not working on this damn movie is all of you. And once again, today, not just supporting the channel, but your opinions and the way you state them, and you're respectful to your fellow fans. That's the best thing in the world. That's what we're here for. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Louise X Sparrow. All the people I can't see, Brian Hepburn, Justin Toner, Joshua Levesque. Am I missing anyone else? I don't know. I don't know who's here. But I want to thank all the Blue Wrenches for being as cool as you are. So thank you for that. I will be back tonight with Midnight Metal at midnight Pacific time. And on that note, I thank all of you for being here. What a hell of a show this was. And again, I thank all of you because, my God, I love not talking about Star Wars and Star Trek. My God, it's nice to talk about something new or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And I will say that I listened on today's show and I learned a lot. And thank you. And I will be back tomorrow with Robservations episode number 726. And I hope to see you all. Wait. This is Jonathan Butcher. He sent this to me from... It's not quite this, but it's still fucking metal. So, join us for Midnight Metal. And on that note, I would say to all of you, have a better day. And you know what? We have the power!